Welcome back to Hashtag Adulting, everybody. I'm Zach Peter.
And I'm Abigail Frere.
How you doing? How is that Ohio weather? Are you missing LA?
I'm missing the sunshine. It's been gloomy for like 5 days straight, but it's fine. It's not 95 degrees and stuck inside, so I can live with that.
Yeah, right? I know.
I can see the sun coming through your window right now. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a bit jealous.
I know. I love the weather, but it's hot, but I don't know. I'm glad I have at least AC and stuff, because I know some people are sweating their balls off right now inside.
Yeah.
Today's guest is here to debunk every BuzzFeed quiz you've ever taken. If you think you're an introvert or an extrovert or an INGFE, I don't even know what that means. He's here to set the record straight with his new book, Personality Isn't Permanent. So here to help me figure out which of my multiple personalities is for real. Please welcome Dr. Benjamin Hardy.
Thank you, my good friend.
How are you, Dr. Ben?
Doing good.
This is like Zach's dream come true. It's just like we love digging deeper into like ourselves, and so your book, we were able to read it preparing, and it's awesome. And we just want to kind of let our viewers get a little more comfortable with you, let you get a little comfortable with us. We're gonna do a little icebreaker. It's called Espresso Yourself, and I'm just gonna have you complete the following sentences for me.
Oh goodness.
Okay, are you ready?
Of course.
So the first one is, I can't start my day without.
Like green/red smoothies. I've got this crazy concoction I created.
Flashcard, what's in those?
I don't know. It's like green powder, red powder, all sorts of crazy stuff.
Oh, okay. And is it like immune boosting, or it's just like all around healthy? Are you a coffee drinker? No.
No, but that stuff is just tons of fruits and vegetables and crazy odd stuff.
Okay.
It's great.
The next is I feel sexiest when.
Probably when I'm working out.
Okay. Which leads us to the next one. When I go to the gym, I
crush it.
Crush it.
I love it.
That's a good one. What does your workout routine consist of normally?
I don't really believe in routine in that sense. Like I don't go and do the same workout over and over again. But when I can go to the gym, which is really enjoyable, I like doing that. I just go high intense. I'll do, if I'm working out with someone, I'll do what they're doing. We'll go off of each other. I like doing heavy, and I also like as far as weightlifting, but I also like just constantly go.
Okay.
So I do all sorts of stuff, stretching, but I like just going high intense for 30 minutes rather than some slow workout. Sure. I really like endurance.
Zach likes endurance too.
Yeah, I love to run. I love to just push myself.
I love running too.
And then the last one is, I feel most like a boss when
Sorry, I feel most like a boss when
I'm blank.
Okay, yeah, sorry, back up. Yeah, probably when I'm writing. Yeah, okay. Probably when I'm writing.
With writing, do you have set times that you sit down to write? Is it something that you have to be feeling, or do you kind of hover off for 2 days and get a lot done? What's your writing style like? What does that look like for you?
It depends on what I'm writing. Okay. If I'm writing a book, which is a lot heavier and you kind of need to get into it, I usually have to cut off everything. So I have a separate house here in Florida, which is where I do stuff like this and write and stuff. Okay. When I'm doing a book, clear the calendar. I can't do anything for a few months, and I have to just go into it.
Okay.
So, wouldn't do podcasts, things like that.
Sure.
When it comes to writing articles,
yeah,
just wake up in the morning. Usually I have to think about it a little bit in my journal. It's best if I actually have a few thoughts or bullets the night before, so that I could kind of wake up and have a few thoughts, so I don't have to think about that. But yeah, usually for me it's about getting myself into the right frame of mind, to the right mindset. Once I'm there, and I can just kind of basically just stream of conscious. So a lot of it's in the setup of structuring the article, but also setup as far as my mindset. Once I can do that, writing's very easy.
Nice. Does your personality have a lot to do with your writing style?
I guess you could say, yeah. I would say, are you talking about the voice I write in, or are you talking about how I sit and do it?
I'm just
doing it at 8 in the morning?
I'm just trying to tease you because your book is called Personality Isn't Permanent. So why don't you actually define for us, because you have a really hot take. So I feel right now we're all obsessed with BuzzFeed quizzes and Enneagram and the myers-briggs. we have all of these different quizzes that we now go to figure out who we are and like what our preferences should be or how we should live our life. And your new book really kind of debunks that. And you're very, you don't support a lot of those quizzes, or you think that they're not very accurate. Can you explain why you think, where you think they fall short and what personality is as according to you?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so personality, obviously, there's tons of different theories on it. No theory is perfect, but generally, at a very basic level, personality could be viewed as just how you consistently show up in your life. Consistent attitudes, consistent behaviors, how you show up in situations. Keyword consistent. And yeah, so the reason why personality, so when I went through my PhD, I was really surprised. I wasn't that big of a fan of personality tests. Actually, I tell the story about how my wife almost didn't marry me because of a personality test at the beginning of the book. But I didn't really take them that seriously, but I was very surprised about the idea that these types of tests are essentially on the level of horoscopes. Like, personality shouldn't really be viewed as categories. And there's a lot of reasons why. First off, let me just ask you both a question, and we'll start from there.
Oh boy.
So, yeah, I'll start with the question. So we'll start with Zach, actually.
Okay, great.
So Zach, are you the exact same person you were 10 years ago?
Oh, not at all. I feel like I grow so much every single year that like the person I was this time last year is completely different from the person I am now. And I feel like I was lucky enough to recognize that at a very young age. And so I've always been somebody that's really run towards self-improvement and self-development, knowing that I'm constantly growing and evolving and trying to grow and evolve.
Yeah. Epic. Couldn't agree more. Abigail, what about you? Abigail, right?
Yes, Abigail. No, you're good. I have to agree that I definitely am different. Even just like political views or thoughts on certain topics have changed drastically over 10 years. But I do think that certain
quirks, traits.
So traits. So I don't know how you categorize everything. So I guess like I've always been outgoing. I've always been outspoken. I've always been not afraid of conflict. Like those things haven't changed much. Maybe I've adapted in the sense that I've become more tuned into other people or how I use those traits, but I think those have stayed fairly consistent.
Yeah. There's probably not much reason to change those. Those are probably pretty good things to have, right?
Yeah, and like the bad things we got rid of or whatever.
So basically, Daniel Gilbert, he's a Harvard psychologist. He's spent a lot of time studying this. I would recommend anyone listen to his TED Talk. It's called The Psychology of Your Future Self. Very good. 6 minutes long. Very efficient. But basically what he does is he asks people, are you the exact same person you were 10 years ago? Most people say no. Most people say, I'm quite different. I've got different priorities, different habits, different perspectives, different routines, different behaviors, different relationships. But then he asks people, are you going to be that same person? Are you going to be the same person in 10 years from now? Zach, knowing Zach, like from what I know already, like I think Zach's already pretty sure he's going to be a different person in 5-10 years from now. I think you probably would be too.
1 minute from now.
He's going to be a different person by the end of this episode. No. But what most people do is most people actually underplay the changes that they think will happen in the future. Most people think that even if they've changed dramatically in the past, they think that who they are right now is who they're mostly going to be, which is a really inaccurate way of looking at things. Your future self should be viewed as a totally different person than who you are today because they actually are going to be. They're going to make different decisions, have a different perspective. And so as a result of this, and there's actually a lot of research that talks about how you will make better decisions in your life if you view your future self as a different person. And if you use that as kind of the basis for the decisions you make today. If you don't have a clear future self, then you actually don't know what to do today. You can do whatever you want because there's no outcome.
All right, I want to pop in and give some love to this week's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Best Fiends. I talked about it last month, and I probably won't stop talking about it because I love it. Best Fiends is a fun puzzle game free to download directly to your phone. Each level is a new adventure to take down those evil slugs and collect these adorable little creatures called Fiends. At this point, my Fiends are my babies, and they are the best, of course. I've already made it to level 100. I don't think I've ever made it to level 100 on like any video game ever until now. I'm very competitive by nature, so when it comes to slaying those slugs, I'm in it to win it, baby. It keeps my mind active, my boredom at bay, and it's just a blast to play. Engage your brain with fun puzzles and collect tons of cute characters. Trust me, with over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated mobile puzzle game is a must play. Download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends.
You're telling people to make decisions based on their future self. How do you even know that, like, the place that I'm in right now can even imagine a future self in an appropriate way? Like, what does that look like?
I'll tell you exactly what mine looks like. I'm going to be married. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to have a mansion. I'm going to have 4 cars that I don't even drive, but I have drivers to drive me around, Abigail. That is my future. I'm predicting it now.
On what your priorities are right now, and isn't that based on where you're at right now? Like, how do you break those apart?
He just did it.
That might, but if you ask him, 10 years ago, his future self, it wouldn't have been the same thing as it is now, and it may not have been what he is now. So, like, how do you actually do that?
Yeah, you're viewing future self as static.
Okay.
It's not static. In fact, wherever you are in a year from now, hopefully you have a different version of your future self that's a little better, and also hopefully you can view your former self better as well. Because what is that
future self? Like, is that a year out? Is what we're doing it for? Like, that is where I think your book trips me up a little bit, because I'm just like, well, I know personally what I want my future self to be right now, but that might change.
I hope it does, because hopefully your future self can make better goals than you can today. Hopefully mine can as well. So yeah, I would think probably 2-3 years out, Zach's maybe, I don't know how long his goals are out, and it's cool to go, like, it's cool to have huge goals way out there, but I think having something super practical that you can actually make dramatic progress towards, probably 2-3 years would be really great. If you could think about where you want to be in 2 to 3 years from now and really define out what your situation is, what your characteristics are like. The reason this is all super important is because this may sound weird, but your future self actually is more interesting and more important than your current self, as weird as that sounds. Because your current self is temporary, and this kind of goes into personality testing. The problem with personality testing is that there's so much emphasis on who you are today that what ends up happening for people is they get very definitive about labeling themselves today. And that ends up actually creating a fixed mindset for themselves in the future. Like, if I heavily define myself as an introvert or as anything, an INTJ, an orange, a purple, a Simba, then I actually think that my future self is going to be the same person as I am today, because I'm being so defined in my identity.
I agree with that.
Because identity becomes your personality. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
I feel like so many people take these quizzes. Like, I feel like the biggest one right now, I know Enneagram is kind of starting to have a moment. Myers-Briggs, I see that on like everybody's fucking Bumble profile. They're like, I'm this, I'm that. But I feel like right now we're especially in this place of or the new trend is the introvert versus extrovert. And a lot of people are like, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. And I've tried to take some of those quizzes. And I guess what I've learned is that, like, I'm a little bit of both. It really depends on the situation. It depends on the day. It depends on the circumstances. Like, I don't necessarily, like, I would say probably more times than not, I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert. But I also feel like that's because of my job. Like, my job is to give a lot of my attention and to be an extrovert more so on camera. But who's to say that I wouldn't be different if I didn't have a job that would require so much of my energy to bring to, being entertaining. So what do you think? So I agree with you in the sense that, like, these different personality quizzes limit us and don't allow us the ability to continue to grow or to change or evolve, because we become like, we think that we're put into one box and that's the only box we can ever be in. But what do you think about, like, Abigail's point earlier about how there are certain traits that we do have, like some of us are innately really ambitious or, naturally just very driven people. Like, I've always been a very driven person. Does that factor into our personality, or how did the traits that we've shared since we were really young into our adulthood, how do those evolve or not evolve when it comes to our personality?
Absolutely. Really quickly, I'm going to define personality and identity, because, I would agree you're a very ambitious person. I've looked at your profile and things like that. But that's how you also define yourself. that's how you identify. You identify as a very ambitious person, just as Abigail identifies as someone who's very outgoing. And I'm not saying that neither of those are true. They're both true, but that's a big aspect of your identity story. That's how you define yourself, and that's a meaningful way for you to define yourself. So it's going to stay that way until it stops being meaningful to define yourself that way, which may be for the rest of your life. You may see purpose in the future to continuing to be that hyper ambitious stuff, but it may be possible in the future that you'll have an experience that makes you realize maybe all of this ambition that I've been driving for all these years isn't as important as I thought it was. Therefore, you may have a point when you change your mind and therefore change your identity, and then you start changing how you go about doing things. And so it's possible that in the future you'll have experiences that will shift what you prioritize and how you define yourself. But I will say, just as a quick, and go ahead.
Well, so to that point, so is it possible then to then like hack your mindset in the sense that like if you don't feel like you're naturally an ambitious person, is there a way that you can develop that ambition and kind of become an ambitious person? And how do we do that? Because I feel like so many people are like, I'm not, I'm lazy by nature, so I'm never going to start a business. And it's like, well, who's to say you can't start a business?
Yeah, that's again the identity story. That is fundamentally a story that they're telling themselves, and it's based on former experiences. If their future self is someone who's starting businesses and ambitious, that needs to become their new identity story. That needs to be the new story that they tell about themselves. But that story also, so literally, they would need to tell people about their goals, but they would also need to start using that as the basis for their behavior. So when usually your story, the way you describe yourself, is pretty consistent with how you behave. So if the person, yeah, go ahead.
Switching your identity story, and then those things will fall into place.
That's half of it. That's not even all of it. Like I think, just for an example, is with addiction. Like if someone's overcoming addiction, a big aspect of it, what they say is that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety; it's actually human connection. And so, like a big thing that I know when someone's going to overcome an addiction, when they start to own that they are no longer wanting to be the person that they are today. They're wanting to detach from their past. And when they're saying, look, I'm ready to change, I've got this issue that I have, and they can call it an issue or whatever they want to call it. They say, I want to be different in the future. Because there's a quote that basically says you're as sick as your secret. So like for someone who's got an addiction or a problem, like you're going to probably keep it secret, and you're going to keep it secret until you're ready to change. And so changing the story and focusing on the future and who you want to be and starting to admit and tell people who you want to be takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to open up and be honest about what you're actually wanting to do. So that's a big aspect of it. Other aspects are obviously like behaving, investing money into your new goals, surrounding yourself with the right people, detaching yourself from former stories and also from former people who would very much discourage you from making changes. So the story is just one aspect of it, but that, from my perspective, is one of the biggest aspects because it takes a huge amount of thought as far as deciding who you actually want to be. Like Zach is someone who's like, and you probably are as well, very obvious into self-improvement, individualization, and stuff like that. And so like very easy for him to just talk about his goals and even very vocally talk about his goals. I think that's huge. For a lot of people, that would take a huge amount of courage and a huge amount of development to get to the point where they're so open and honest about that. But then obviously you've got to go through the process.
I'm very courageous and very honest about a lot of stuff. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that there is a lot more power in our decisions, which I feel like scares a lot of people because they want to take the control out of themselves. And especially like when it comes to addiction or when it comes to, I feel like our culture has very much conditioned us to believe that like if we are addicts, then like that's just how it's always going to be. Or, if we do struggle with, mental health, maybe that's how it's always going to be. Are you saying that that's not that there's not a ton of truth to that, or what are you saying in terms of like addiction and mental health?
I'm saying it doesn't always have to be anything. What I'm saying is that actually the current version of you doesn't really matter. As weird as that sounds. And just to be honest with you, like even this book, like my future self is probably going to disagree with many aspects of this book. I can say that because my current self disagrees with aspects of this book. And so it's important to just realize like it's easy as a writer to look at my former work and be like, holy cow, I can't believe I said that. It's easy for me to look back on my former stuff and say like, wow, I'm very different. And so I think it's important to get to the point where you become flexible enough where you realize the future is the same way. And so that's why I think you would hold your current identity loosely and you would never actually say anything is an always. Like, and to your point, in certain situations, you're actually going to be different. You're not always just one thing. You're not always just an introvert. You're not always anything. In various situations, you're different. So there is no always. And then the goal is just to make choices about what you want to do.
So I think the interesting part of that is we also have these fun little critters on social media. I like to call them trolls, who then like to come at you and be like, "Oh, well,
Huge.
you changed, you flip-flopped, you've changed your point of view," and they then call you, a hypocrite. What is your response to the people who are like, "Oh, well, Dr. Ben's a hypocrite because he's always changing and he doesn't have, a backbone to like stand by one thing or another."
Hmm. Well, I think that's a great thought. It doesn't really matter to me. I think it's better to be just honest with where you're really at and to make changes. Like, to think you know all the answers right now is ego.
Mm.
And so basically, as human beings, we have a desire to be consistent. And what a lot of people will do is they will choose to be consistent with the version of themselves that they don't want to be, just so that they can be viewed as consistent. In my opinion, it's actually better to be consistent with your future self, which would actually require that you're non-consistent with your former self. And so, to me, it's actually a good sign when someone is making a change and when they're honest about it. When they say, "This is who I am, this is the direction I'm going, and this is why." I think being able to explain yourself is big.
So, do you define future self as like the goal self? Because to me, I'm
To
thinking
some
future
degree,
self as me in the future, but it sounds like the way I'm at least interpreting this is like you're saying, look at our future self as, the person that we want to become or think that we will
want to
become,
be.
want
Yeah.
to become.
It's
Okay.
about intention. It's so the and it's really important. I think of personality and comfort zone as very similar concepts. Subconscious fits in the same equation, but your comfort zone is what you're comfortable doing. It's what's easy, or anytime you go outside of that, you're going to experience a multitude of emotions because there's going to be uncertainty involved.
Right.
And so, anytime you are pursuing a goal, you're going to deal with uncertainty. It's going to take courage. You're going to probably mess up, fail, learn. That's how you actually learn. But yeah, your future self is who you want to be. It's not who you're trying to discover yourself as. It's a choice you make. It's that's why they say the number one deathbed regret is that people didn't have the courage to be who they wanted to be. Instead, they lived up to the expectations of those around them. This is about making choices about the person you want to be, and eventually building the confidence that you can actually have what you want in your life, whatever it may be. Your current future self is only based on your current level of confidence and your current knowledge. You can't set goals that you're unaware of. I found that out very bluntly with my three foster kids. They came from a rough environment, had zero exposure to much. Like, they lived out in the country of South Carolina. Their parents were high on drugs. They were watching TV all day. They weren't aware of very much. Like, and so you give them a new environment, you expose them to new things, and with new exposure, you can then conceptualize new things. And so obviously, learning is a big aspect of this. You're only going to be able to set goals that you're aware of, but also you're only going to set goals that you're confident enough to pursue. And so your confidence and flexibility as a person is key. Like, and that's why I would say for Abigail, in the future, to the extent you develop confidence and even awareness of other things, you will set different and better goals.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to pursue things in the future to actually develop that.
And I feel like it's important too for all the listeners to understand, like, your future self, like, you're never gonna reach your future self. Like, it's always like we're continually evolving till the day we die. There's never like a because I think that's a lot of times too why people like the personality test, or they like the consistency or the finality of things. And like, I think that's what's also hard is like your future self, like tomorrow you're gonna have a different. It's always you're gonna continually be raising the bar, I guess,
Growing.
on self
Yeah.
and your personality.
Yeah, I can see that. And one thing that's really interesting about all this as well, though, is your former self. Like, that actually is something that evolves as well. Like, just as an example, someone who has been through a lot of trauma or addiction or things like that. As you grow and evolve as a person, you actually relate differently with your past. You actually generally develop a better relationship with your former self, with your past, with your memory, and your past becomes something that's positive. So this is really definitely about growth. This is a definite. First off, personality is going to change whether you're growing or not. You're going to change over your life. Like, research is pretty clear on that. So yes, I have a strong bias towards the idea that you should be learning, growing, and developing your perspectives, becoming more mature, letting go of the past. Definitely. And so if you're someone who prefers the consistency of a comfort zone and the consistency of pursuing things that are essentially that feel natural or easy to you, then this would certainly not be a good book for you. But I definitely think from like a happiness standpoint, from like a mindset standpoint, change is hugely possible And a big reason why people stop changing, like just as an example, I've got two 17-month-old twins. We live in Florida. We need to teach those twins how to swim so that they don't go get drowned in the pool. And so we put these little, we don't do it, we've got a swimming instructor, puts these little girls who can't even talk in the pool. And they hate it. They're crying and they are learning how to swim. That's kind of how my wife and I felt when we became foster parents of 3 kids. And we freaking went from 0 to 5 kids in 1 year. I'm not recommending that to anyone. All I'm saying is I'm a very different person than the person who didn't have 5 kids.
Okay.
And if I thought I was a patient or if I thought I was a nice person, I realized back then that none of that had ever actually been tested by situations.
Sure.
And so I'm very glad that I did that. And I now realize, having gone through that I can do a lot more than I thought I could before. And so I think that, and this is definitely true in the research, that is, as people age, they become less open to new experiences. They become less open to do it. You know, as a 17-year-old girl or 17-month-old girl, those girls don't have choice. We're putting them in the freaking pool and we're teaching them how to swim.
Right.
At some point when they get older, they're going to have a choice. They get to choose to what extent they want to go out of their comfort zone to pursue meaning, to pursue life, or to define themselves by their current weaknesses.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, what I like about the message that you're putting out there is that it shows that there is an ongoing, like, ever, like, we're always evolving, we're always growing, we're always changing, and that power is in, like, our potential is in our choices and decisions that we make today for who we want to be moving forward. And there's a lot of choice and want and I guess power just in ourselves that I think a lot of people are afraid of, and that's why we like to stay, stuck in these boxes. And I don't know, I've never been somebody that's been like black or white. I'm always like in the gray. I've never been red or blue. I'm always in the purple. Like I feel like there's always room to kind of grow, and I don't like, and that's kind of one of the issues that I'm even having currently with people on social media is we've turned this whole, COVID-19 situation into, pitting people against each other, and we've turned it into a debate of red versus blue, or a debate of pro-life versus pro-choice, or pro-vax versus anti-vax. And I'm like, it's not as simple. Like, nothing is as simple as that. And if you, treat this or treat your life as if we're all on a football field and I'm this team and you're that team, and, we're always going to have differences, then it's like nobody ever wins at the end of that. Or like one team wins, but it's like it never, I don't know. I just think it's a really, not helpful way to come at life,
I love what you're saying. I think it's so true. Actually, the whole overly categorizing of people, first off, it's not actually an accurate way of looking at people. How you described yourself when you're going on the introversion extroversion thing was actually like exactly how a psychologist would view you. Like, in one context, you're going to be different from you are in a different context. Like in one role, you're the host of the show. In another role, you might be sitting down, be relaxing and needing a break. And so like when you overly focus on either categories or content, then it's literally the same type of thinking as racism or like black and white thinking, where it's just not true. Like no one is just a pure, even like Bernie Sanders on one side, like no one is exactly one way. Like,
right.
And so it's a lot better to be nuanced in how you're seeing things. So I love what you're saying.
Yeah, I feel like we just like to put people into boxes, and it's not really a fair representation of, who any of us really are.
Agreed.
I want to touch too before we run out of time on authenticity, and you speak about that directly in your book, and I think it's definitely a conversation we should have, especially with, social media. You hear everyone's like, oh, I'm my authentic self, and I'm authentic because I hate this or I love this, or I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to tell you that I'm lazy and I'm going to sit on my ass today and I'm speaking my authentic self. Like, tell me about this. Why is that? Like, why is it bad? Why are people getting wrapped up in that? And like, dive more into that for all of our listeners, because I fully loved the section of your book on this.
Did you? That's so funny. I love what you were saying. You're going so passionate. You had Zach laughing over there. I want to hear more of that. That was pretty awesome. So there's a really good, I quote Adam Grant, who's a really smart, famous author and psychologist. Really love his work. And he gave a commencement speech at Utah State. And he was talking about how when he was a graduate student, he hated public speaking. But essentially he wanted to become a public speaker one day, but he hated doing it because it was awkward for him. He was terrible at it. It was not within his personality or his authentic self. But basically what he said is, and he's someone who's gone against the notion of authenticity. Actually, if you look him up, him and Brene Brown have had some serious battles. And like, he loves Brene, I love Brene, but they've had some serious battles about this subject. Very interesting. I'm more on Adam Grant's side on this one, where, he talked about how he had to go against his authentic self, because his authentic self in this case was someone who hated public speaking in order to become someone who actually loved that. And it took some work. But yeah, I think that authenticity these days is so focused on the current self and on the current preferences, like what I prefer right now, and what I prefer right now is to go eat pizza and like go, sit and hang out. And your current preferences are not really usually a good basis for decision making, because, often our preferences are just seriously just to like indulge our dopamine in the moment. And so your future preferences actually matter a lot more. And so from my perspective, authenticity should be about what you truly want, not what's truly comfortable. And I think with authentic, and I actually cite, as you read, like that, like high school kids are boycotting doing difficult things like public speaking and stuff like that. They're boycotting things that would force them out of their shell and into uncertainty so that they can actually develop flexibility and confidence. And instead they're like, I really want to defend my comfort zone. And so that's kind of a really good way of looking at authenticity these days. Basically, it's people saying, I shouldn't have to do anything that I don't want to do, or anything that's hard, or anything that's outside my comfort zone.
I love that, because I feel like so many people, it's your comfort zone for a reason, because you feel safe in it. You want to stay there. I'm telling you right now, my authentic self is coming out. My roots are coming out in this quarantine. This is the authentic me. Oh my God. Okay. Well, your new book is called, can you let us know when the book is available and what's it called for everybody really quickly, Dr. Ben?
Sure. Yeah, it's called Personality Isn't Permanent. And it comes out June 16th, available anywhere you want it. I think there's probably about 150 journal prompts throughout this book for reframing former experiences, for designing your future self, for holding your identity a little bit more loosely so you don't strive to defend it or confirm it. And yeah, I think that the book will be really helpful for people in understanding how trauma has impacted them in other various areas of life. And if you just go to benjaminhardy.com, that's my website, you can find more.
I love it. benjaminhardy.com. Personality Isn't Permanent, on sale June 16th. You can pre-order it right now. Thank you again, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, for calling in and for chatting with us and for breaking down why we're not introverts or extroverts, but probably both. Likely both. Definitely both. I'm both. I'm blonde and I have black hair.
Everyone is both.
Everyone is both. My hair is both right now, too. Abigail, where can people follow you and keep up with you on the gram?
You guys can find me on all social media, Abigail_AF.
You guys can follow me at Just Plain Zach all over the internet. And don't forget to follow at The Adulting Podcast on Instagram. You can also catch the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook. We have full episodes on Facebook and YouTube that you can watch, and listen to the show always on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Pandora. Oh, I forgot all the rest of the places, but we're basically everywhere. Give us a 5-star review, because we love that validation. We're millennials and we need your validation. So please validate us today. And until next time, Abigail, what will we be doing?
Be busy, #adulting.
Yay. And we're out.